0 days to expiration, 0 DTE options have recently gained popularity, giving active traders rapid exposure to the market in an extremely liquid environment. Last week, the market welcomed QQQY, the first ETF constructed using 0 DTE options. And how it will perform is a huge question. At Tasty, we have a large collection of data on 0 DTE SPX options. How would a similarly structured fund using those same criteria, how would it have performed? Love this. Let's go to the next slide. So here was the study we created. We examined 6 months. I said 3 to 6 months. I wasn't sure. 6 months of 0 DTE data. We simulated a fund that followed the QQQY white paper, but with the SPX options in place of the QQQ options. So A, every day we held 80% of its capital in cash. B, we used the remaining 20% to sell 0 DTE SPX puts with an even mix of strikes from at the money to 5% in the money. While the QQQY is actively managed to automate the process, for our fund positions, they were all held through expiration with new positions for the next day sold as those expired, okay? Because we can't assume we're gonna manage intraday. The results were contrasted between $100,000 invested in this fund and $100,000 worth of SPY shares. So it would be the equivalent of 259 shares of SPY. I said
Right
250.
there, right.
From March 13th of 23. Would you like to change your answer?
No.
Mr. Batista declines the opportunity to change his answer. And a good decline it was.
Beautiful.
Let's go to the next slide. So, on a $100,000 investment, the 0 DTEs, and this is surprising to me because remember, this is a bullish position we're up.
Yeah, no, I agree.
The 0 DTEs made $10,378. The SPY shares made $15,000.
With a small long delta. I mean, 10 deltas, I know don't mean anything, but I mean a small longish 10 deltas.
No.
Over SPY shares. All I'm showing you, the average delta is what it says.
Oh, yeah, that's just the average. But
I know,
they
I'm
were
just
259,
saying, I mean,
whatever. They're
yeah.
close enough.
Yeah.
The minimum delta got down to 184, and then the max got to 297. But the average
Obviously,
was
the shares are going to stay consistent.
yeah.
They don't
The
change.
average was 269 to 259. It was very good. So basically, you made more money just being long the SPY shares in this case. But there's another small takeaway from this. It's interesting that the deltas didn't fluctuate that much on the 0 DTEs. Let's go to the next slide. This is really interesting. Okay. You would think that there would have been a huge difference between the two, but it wasn't. Even though we were in a bull market for the last 6 months, the SPY shares were only up 56% of the time. The daily wins on the 0 DTE ETF was 54% of the time. Wasn't that much different.
No.
The CVAR, which is your outlier risk, was the exact same.
Yeah.
Didn't move. Your worst day wasn't that much different.
Similar, yeah, and the best day was similar too.
And the best day was similar too.
Right.
So there wasn't that much difference between the two.
Right.
They were actually, the way the whole thing worked out in the end, they were basically the same exact thing.
Yes, basically. Yeah.
So the 0 DTF fund was very similar to buying the SPY shares. You know how we always say everything is perfectly priced? Well, everything is perfectly priced.
Yeah.
Yeah. And believe me, if the SPY hadn't been up, if the SPY had not been up for the last 6 months, you would have ended up with the SPY shares being unchanged and the 0 DT ETF being up 10,000. So it really depends on market environment, stuff like that. Let's go to the next slide. So a long 0 delta ETF may sound turbulent, but during this time, the QQQY approach applied to SPX options maintained very similar deltas as the daily risk compared to using the same capital to hold SPY shares. Why is that important? It's important because every article I read on this talked about how much risk there was in that 0 DT fund. When the reality of 0 DT fund using 20% of the capital was the risk was exactly the same as buying $100,000 worth of stock. Exactly.
It's pretty good.
The long shares did outperform our simulated fund, however, in both in daily profitability and net P&L. While these results of an automated SPX 0DTA ETF, QQQY is actively managed. Its managers are free to determine the allocation of its 20% amongst various short puts to manage these positions early. Only time will tell if the actual performance of QQQY is really better than or worse than the Qs or the whatever other thing. The important thing here is without managing it all. So we did not have the advantage of managing. The results.
Is it an advantage? It just doesn't seem like it's that much of an advantage.
The results were exactly the same.
Yeah.
The results of these two things were basically the exact same, which means that as crazy as all this sounds, as crazy everybody thought this index was risk-wise, if you use 20%, it's basically the exact same thing.
Good job out of you. Good job out of the team. Nice research. We're going to take a quick 90-second break and come back. We got more Tasty Live. Oh, joy. It's time for Mr. Scott Sharon, Tasty Trade World Headquarters right after this. Commercial message from your broadcasters.